want to talk a little bit about a special kind of part of the acquisition process that people don't normally even think about or know about before they get into procuring software or any other product, as the case may be. And that's the statement of the need to acquire, which is really a business document, and it kind of precedes the process. Most of you are used to, the first stage in the process of acquiring a piece of software being the place where you develop the project plan and the specification. But in reality, nobody should ever buy a piece of software, particularly where security is an issue, without thinking about it in terms of the business case. Now, the business case basically says that if you're going to purchase something to run in a computer facility, that thing you purchase ought to support the purposes of the business. Or in really simple terms, if you're going to buy a piece of software, that piece of software ought to be justifiable both in terms of the fact that it's cool and fun, and it's a brand new something that everybody always, all your friends have bought, that sort of stuff. Is really meaningless when you think about the possibility that it might expose their organization to exploitation because it's either unsafe or insecure. And so when you sit down to do a purchase, what you do first of all is look at the exact aspect of the business that the software is meant to support. Now, when I say that, what I mean basically is if you're looking at, say, buying a new general ledger software, a piece of software, that piece of software basically ought to be an upgrade to something that currently exists. It ought to provide functionality that is in addition to what currently exists. And in really simple terms, it ought to be justifiable in the sense that it gives you enough additional functionality that there's a cost saving or an additional opportunity for increasing the value of the corporation on the margins. So basically, the first thing that I kind of need you to understand is that all software purchases ought to be cost justifiable based on what additional value they bring to the organization or what opportunities they create for the organization in terms of additional business. Second thing that you need to think about when you're thinking about a need to acquire is the issue of how that functionality fits in the system as a whole. You look at a piece of software and that functionality and you say to yourself, well, this is really going to give me something and I really, really want to have it, and you can even say, well, it's cost justifiable and all that other sort of stuff. But if you have a system that is running at a certain level in terms of either versions or in terms of simply what it does, what you're doing basically is plugging a new piece of software into that system, and that new piece of software has got to fit. That's where the security angle comes in. Software that is inappropriate or simply just not configurable to fit into a currently existing system is going to create cracks. That's the easiest way to view it. I mean, basically the interfaces aren't going to fit properly. There are going to be gaps in how this new piece of software interacts with the current system. And those are the gaps that are exploitable by outsiders in terms of people hacking into it, or even insiders in the sense that people can kind of do things in the gray areas without, being properly monitored. And so when you do a statement of need to acquire, one of the things you got to think about basically is the interdependencies between and the interfaces between the software that you currently have in your system and the new thing. And essentially that involves doing your homework sufficiently to look at the specifications for the system, for the new software, the current specification of your system. You might want to look at whatever configuration management baselines you've got in your current system, and basically ask yourself the question, does this piece of software fit in a way that's going to create a seamless relationship between the new stuff and the old stuff? If the answer to that is no, then you've got extra special issues later on. Doesn't mean don't buy it. What it does mean basically is you've got to take into consideration the fact that you're going to need to bridge between the old stuff and the new stuff, and that's going to create additional costs. It could create additional vulnerabilities, and none of this is thought about basically before you specify the system. And so that's the final point. When you do your system specifications, that specification ought to be directly off the statement of need to acquire. Or in simple terms, the specification ought to match the business case. Now, essentially when you're doing the need to acquire, what you're doing basically is developing the business case for the software item you're going to install. And so the idea basically is that there ought to be a seamless fit between why you're buying the software and what you're buying. And that's the specification. From that point on, the regular acquisition process follows. There are a number of pitfalls there in terms of what you're buying, in terms of just making sure that what you buy is what you wanted to buy. But that all starts from getting the initial definition of what you're trying to buy in hand. It ought to be a formal document. It ought to go by everybody in the organization, from the CEO all the way down, and particularly the legal people, all the way down to the system people. But everybody ought to take a look at it. Everybody ought to sign off on it. And then once they've signed off on it, you can move on to the next step in the process, which is specification.